Welcome to Session 9 of the In the Life of Joseph Bible Study. You can get your copy of the guide using the link in the description. Today, we're in Genesis chapter 40 verses 5 to 8. Let's dive in.
Night fell over the king's prison, but this was no ordinary silence. The very air seemed charged with a message that the walls of stone could not contain. In the depths of the night, the chief butler saw a vision of life. A vine growing, blossoming, and ripening in seconds, a taste of a world he thought he'd lost. But for the chief baker, the dream felt like a weight. Shadowy and heavy, it carried a premonition that chilled his spirit even in his sleep. One night, two dreams, both men sat up at the exact same moment, the echoes of their visions still ringing in the silence of their cells. Morning arrived, but it brought no light to their spirits. The sun crawled across the cold limestone, finding the chief butler exactly where the nightmare had left him. Beside him, the chief baker was a picture of broken pride. The man who once oversaw the king's kitchens now looked like a man who had already seen his own end. Around them, the prison pulse began to beat. Men moved to their labors, but the two officials remained frozen, trapped in the memory of the night. Their faces told a story that needed no words. It was the look of men who had been visited by the supernatural and found themselves utterly helpless to understand it. Joseph entered the ward as he did every morning, ready to manage the accounts. But today, he didn't look at his scroll. He looked at the men. He was a man of high rank in a low place, yet he was never too busy to see the people behind the bars. His kindness had made him a refuge in the house of stone. When he reached the chief butler and the baker, he didn't see the usual pride of the palace. He saw the telltale sign of a spirit in turmoil. Joseph did something few in Egypt would ever do for a prisoner. He put down his authority to pick up the burden. Joseph remembered a time when he was the one with the mystery. Before the bars, before the betrayal, there were the golden fields of home. He had stood before his brothers, brimming with the excitement of a dreamer, unaware that his revelation would become their motivation for malice. It was Jacob who taught him that dreams were more than just images of the mind. His father was the first to show him that an interpretation was a bridge to the divine. Now, in the dim light of a foreign prison, the son was becoming the father. Joseph looked at the two men and saw the same weight his father had once carried for him. Joseph stepped out of the light of his own position and into the shadow of the distress. He didn't wait for them to come to him, he went to where they sat in the dust. This was a different Joseph. He once missed the scowls of his brothers but now saw every line of worry on their faces. His heart softened over time. He asked the question that would change the course of history. Not a question of crime or punishment, but a question of the soul. Why do you look so sad today? The chief butler looked up. In a world of yes men and God kings, he had found a man in authority who actually cared about the disposition of his heart. They had tried to ask for help, but in a prison of stone, the only voice they heard was the mockery of those who saw the dreams as the delusions of the doomed. Egypt was a land of dream books and magicians, but those secrets were reserved for the palace, not for the forgotten men in the house of the captain. They whispered of the wise men, the sages who could read the stars and the mind. But they were miles away, basking in the king's favor, while these men sat in the silence of the pit. It was a total helplessness, trapped by walls of stone and a spiritual silence that no Egyptian god seemed willing to break. The silence was finally broken. The chief butler, once very confident in the Pharaoh's court, admitted the one thing his rank couldn't solve.
We each have had a dream.
The baker finished the sentence with a hollow voice.
And there is no interpreter of it.
In a land of magic, they were surrounded by spiritual silence. It was a scene of total reversal. Two of the most powerful men in the world's greatest empire, reduced to searching for crumbs of understanding. Joseph listened. He didn't just hear their words, he felt the weight of their worry, a serious offense, hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Joseph did not shrink from the mystery. He stood tall, the sunlight from the high window hitting his white tunic like a mantle of authority. He had the confidence of a man who knew the secret keeper. He wasn't guessing, he was resting in the power of his God.
God is the interpreter of dreams. What you saw is a prophecy. I will interpret it for you, and it will be fulfilled.
The officials were stunned. In a land that worshipped 1,000 idols, a Hebrew prisoner was claiming that the truth belonged to his God alone. Joseph didn't stay on his pedestal of authority. He met them in their mess, creating a space where the secrets of the palace could finally be shared in the safety of the pit.
Tell them to me, please.
The butler felt the shift. For the first time in months, the long face of misery began to break, replaced by a glimmer of hope that his story finally had a listener. The baker hesitated, but Joseph's confidence was contagious. He took a breath and prepared to reveal the darkness of his night. The prison walls no longer mattered. In that small circle of trust, the king's officials and the Hebrew slaves stood on the threshold of a revelation that would shift the foundations of Egypt. The butler reached back into the night. As he began to speak, the dream returned, so vivid, so real, he could almost feel the weight of the grapes in his hand. The baker looked up, his eyes searching the ceiling for the birds of his nightmare, fearing that the truth Joseph was about to speak would be his undoing. Joseph was ready. He started by solving prisoners' puzzles with the wisdom of a king and the care of a servant.
What do these visions signify? The revelation is coming. Join us in our next video as Joseph steps into his destiny as the interpreter of dreams. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you're ready for the reveal. You don't want to miss the next chapter.